Sabbath Church. I'm going to try this. Happy Sabbath. Is that right? No? My nephew just sent that from New Zealand. I said, hey, how do you guys do this? I tried my best. I was trying to practice over there. And he said, oh, I'll just spell it to you. See, the reason why it is a picture of my dad. My dad, we have whāngai children. We call them whāngai. What's in English? Foster children. So we always have foster children. Before we had foster children, we just had street kids living in our house. Dad would go around, we have about 30 of them, and now we have foster kids because Mum thought, hey, let's do something a bit more official than them just coming in and going out. So we have a whole bunch of foster kids. And the most latest one, well, that hasn't left, that's lived with us, I think he's 21 now, Hinare, and he's hard of hearing. And so he comes to church. They don't have to come to church because they're foster kids. They can do whatever they want at certain times. But we said, that's cool, we'll take you to rugby, but today we're just going to go to church first, and then we'll take you to rugby later because it's a bit later. And so Hinare came with us to church, and before the day had finished, he was up the front doing a drama, saying words that he didn't even know how to say and just being part of a community and doing it that he said, I'm not going to rugby anymore. I want to be part of this church community. So my dad, what does he do? He says, okay, next week we're all coming and we're going to learn sign language. So I haven't learned it because, of course, I live here in Australia. But whenever you go to my church, everyone's speaking and they're all doing it. I'm like, I feel so jealous because Hinare, we have to face each other and we have to speak. And I feel like I'm part of the family, but I just don't feel like I'm connected in that way. But I love it because my dad always finds ways to connect with people, and that's something that was very special, is very special about my dad. But I feel bad because we've heard some stories about dads, just a couple, and you see the faces light up and the stories and the memories go back, and that means so much to us. And yet, all of us have a father and all of us have a story. Some of them good, some of them bad, and right now I get to share with you. I have the mic, I have the platform, and I get to tell you everything about my dad. I love being a dad. I'm a bit lonely here today, but my wife also has a dad, and she's gone off to visit him today, and so she's also got the thing that feeds the baby, so baby's gone with her, and apparently babies are much more exciting than me today, so all my children have gone over with my wife. But I love it. I love being a dad. I never thought I would because I did have this motto in my life, I'm never going to have children, but I also said I'm never going to get married. So we see that it doesn't work out the way that you think. But I found out that I love it. I love everything about it. Except this time, over this past couple of weeks, I have to acknowledge that though I love being a dad, I really love having Mum around. You know, I've been going to the hospital a couple of times over the past week. Baby just decides to cry for this week for some reason, and I feel the bags under my eyes getting so heavy, and my words slurring, and my mind going slow. And I go, yeah, I know it's Father's Day, but man, do I love Mum right now. So I'm so happy that, I'm going to see my kids at lunchtime with a surprise, but I get a 5-minute or 1 hour break from them to come here and share with you. My dad, however, like I said, an adventure seeker, a guy who taught me that everybody is special to God. Everybody is beautiful to God. Therefore, if I have something to give to them, I will give it. And he had 5 sons. He has 5 sons. And if anyone needed help from 5 sons, even if we didn't know what we're doing, we would have to be there. Dad would send us out there and we'd go on so many adventures. And that's what I love about my dad. My dad also wears a suit and tie. Ever since I was born, he wore a suit and tie. So I thought today, now I was thinking of my dad while I was getting dressed, I'm going to dress like my dad. Sad thing is that I'm the brother that looks just like my dad. And my hair is going to recede a bit more just like my dad. And now, hopefully my waist doesn't come out a bit more like my dad. But I thought today, hey, my dad was born in a suit and tie. But what I love about my dad is that though he wears a suit and tie and he's always worn one, I've seen him swim in that thing. I've seen him go and eat with gang members in the suit and tie. I've seen him play touch rugby in a suit and tie. Just because he wears it and he looks like he should be doing what people in suit and ties do, he's still somebody who wants to connect with community. And I've seen people just go, hey, I don't care what this guy is wearing. He loves me, and we want to spend time with him. So that's something that I love about my dad. The things I don't like about my dad, he left me in the middle of Auckland City when I was 13 years old, and he drove all the way back to Rotorua, which is 2.5 hours away. I said to him, Dad, we had, of course, 2 van loads of 15 to 20 people there. I said, Dad, look at my face. I'm going down to the toilet that's right here. Please do not leave me behind. And I went down, came out in this big city, lived 2.5 hours away, and of course, my dad's gone. But luckily, I have a brother that's 1 year difference in age, and he's used to picking on me on trips, and he had no one to pick on. So he turned around about 45 minutes down the road and said, hey, where's Deveron? And so Dad was, he's in the toilet. We'll go back. So there's some things that, yes, it's great that my dad loves to connect and serve others, but there were some times that my dad would forget that his sons were also there as well. But always loved my dad. Another thing that just happened last week that reminded me that I was turning more into my dad, I have a stepson. So some of us here, we're from broken families. Some of you here, you're hurting because you haven't got your dad around. Maybe your dad wasn't the greatest dad and you don't have great stories to tell. And that's why we have a church community. And we have a God who steps in the place and says, not only am I the ultimate example, I am a good father. And he's willing to step into that place and be there for us. But I have a stepson, and we clash quite a lot. Most of the time it's because he was told that he was the man of the house as a little boy, and now he's come into a house where there is a man in the house. And so we clash. But I was at a board meeting the other night, and Amanda, she was in pain and stuff again, and baby screaming her head off. And Eli steps up to be the man of the house, and he runs around and, can I do this? Can I do that? And nothing worked, because how do you make a baby stop crying? Not everything works, there's no reason for it. How do you fix your mum from being in pain? There's nothing you can do. So he turned around and he ran to her, grabbed her and said, Mum, where's Dad? When's Dad coming home? And I was like, yes. And I got home, get in the car, go to the hospital, give me that baby. Be the man of the house. But he was able to see that I'm a secure place for him. And no matter what crazy adventure my dad took us on, he has always been the secure place for me. So I'm willing to go on an adventure. I'm willing to take some risks because I know that my dad is always there. The biggest and craziest risk, I jumped on a plane and flew to Australia to go to Avondale College. I remember getting on the phone and calling up my dad and saying these words, Dad, I think I made a mistake. What am I doing here? I was here all by myself. And my dad's words were, we are always here for you, but God has brought you this far. You can continue along the way. Just knowing that stronghold, that safe place. So for those of you who have had that experience with the Father, what a blessing. Let's celebrate it. It's a sad memory if you've lost your father, but it's a blessing that you can celebrate and something you can share with others. For those of you who haven't experienced it, welcome to church. Welcome to a community that is willing to replicate the leadership of our Father God and willing to step into the place. So today, instead of talking about fathers, I want to talk to you about the picture of God. Our picture of God, I'm going to need your help because, you've heard it before. That's why you're in church. You've heard a picture of God. You've heard so many stories of God. You've got this idea of what He's like, and yet most of us say, hey, we feel powerless. We feel alone. We feel like we haven't been transformed. We feel like we've just been doing the Christian thing, but we haven't experienced God. And I want to say it's based on the picture that we have of God. So last week we were introduced to this thing on the whiteboard. And I'm going to use the whiteboard again. very quickly, and I'm going to need your help. Oh, thank you. Shall we raise it up on the stage? Let's put it up on the stage. So we set the table, set the idea, and introduced you to this. See, my son's been adding to this. Some big muscly arms. He said they're like dads. They look more like clouds. Here we go. What's this? Thanks, Dad. I liked your message. Love, Eli. Sorry, Eli. But I loved your message. Okay. So we're introduced to this, and I'm going to need your help. Because you've heard enough of a picture of God from the front, but I want to hear from you, and let's build a picture of God together. Okay? So you're going to help me, church? So from this thing that we learned last week, we learned that a lot of the times we just look at behavior, how you act, and we go and tell people, hey, if you just act this way, then you're going to be right with God. If you just act this way, you're going to be a better Christian. If you just act this way, then people are going to like you. We're going to say all sorts of things. If you just ate this food, if you just dressed like this, if you just stopped what you're doing and acted differently, you would be a good Christian. But we found out that through this worldview thing that we were introduced to last week, that God actually empowers you with a spirit that produces fruit. And the fruit isn't actually the actions that we look at, but instead the reasons for the action. So here we have, if you weren't here last week, we have worldview, and this is where we have our first picture. And our worldview that we think, and we're going to talk about our picture of God and our worldview today. When we look at our picture of God, this will determine what values we hold on to. So if we think God is a tyrant, what sort of values are we going to hold on to? We need to hold on to keeping things tight, keeping things within the boundaries, keeping things so we don't hurt the tyrant. But of course, we've got a different picture of God, but this is just what we're going to establish for this graph. After that, the values turn into the beliefs. Well, if I behave a certain way, the tyrant is going to do good things for me. And so I go off and I do my actions. That's not a nice picture of God. Last week, we said that when you're filled with the Holy Spirit, God doesn't change your actions. What he does is he produces fruit that look more like values. Those fruit are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. If he produces those as fruit within you, then your actions can look like anything. When you're in a situation that calls you as a human, that says, hey, somebody has hurt you, well, as a human, my job, my instinct is to hurt you back. Well, when you're filled with these values that the fruits of the Spirit produce, your action might actually come out a bit different. Have you ever been in a situation where you just want to punch someone in the face, but the fruit comes out and goes, you know what? Love, patience, like, man. And you don't. Your action changes. This is based on your worldview or the connection that you have with God. So the worldview we're going to paint is our picture of God. So who's going to help me? What are some words that we're going to use to describe God today? Yell it out and I'll write up. Good. Gentle. Loving and patient. Patient, long-suffering, caring, self-control, selfless, consistent, so it doesn't change. What are some other things? Because these all sound really good, but there's a whole bunch of people that are scared of God. Caring. Loving. We got loving, but thank you. Oh, and we got caring. Let's put a tick because the kids like it. You get it twice. Trustworthy and kind. Man, if God's all these things, why is everyone running away from him? Forgiving. Nice. Faithful. Thank you for adding. You boys still going. Believe. So faith, believing. He's believable. He's faithful and believable. Anything else? I think we've drawn a beautiful picture of God. Jesse. Grateful. He's always talking about thanksgiving. Or giving thanks. Dusak, you're actually saying something. Nice and loud. Wise. Wise because he's elderly, or he's old. Yeah, ancient of days, so he's wise. This is another question that some young people ask: is if God's old, is he elderly? And that's a deep one to think of. Two more, because all our kids are really getting into this. Yeah. Zayden. Respectful. Are you an adventurer? That's what they say in adventurers. Just. I like that one. Just. Any others? Compassionate. Is that right? Is that right, Nema? Yeah. Sorry, my ears are going in 10 different ways. And the reality is when we paint a picture, thank you kids, you can put your hands down, but thank you for participating. I love it, just like Uncle Peter Schultz said, we love having you kids part of our service, part of our family. And when we look at this, and I opened it up, the floodgates opened, because I said, we want a picture of God. And God's not going to fit on this page, is he? He's not going to fit on this whiteboard. If we started saying everything about God, we're not going to fit on this whiteboard. But the picture that we have of God is pretty nice right now, isn't he? What do you think when you look at that as a picture of God? You go, man, why wouldn't I spend time with him? Why wouldn't I speak to him? Why wouldn't I hang out with him? Because he's patient, loving, he's consistent, he doesn't change. Who's ever been with someone who has a mood one moment and then it just switches just like that? And you're just like, oh, I'm walking on eggshells here. That's me. So if you hang out with me and I keep switching around, you're walking on eggshells. He's respectful. He cares about, he's concerned about what you're going through, and he's not going to go and push you in places. He even says, I'm not going to take you further than you can handle in certain situations, that he's not willing to be there and be with you. This is a really nice picture of God. So why do people, I'm going to assume others outside, even though we all struggle with it too, why do people run away from him? Guilt. Maybe because we're nothing like this. Well, I'm going to bring you into something that reflects God's character as well. And I'm going to throw it in here. It's called the 10 Commandments. Does that reflect God's character? Well, it depends on your worldview. Because if you looked at it and you had a worldview that God is a tyrant, it's just something that's about God's discipline. But if you've got a worldview that says God is all these things, then when you look at the 10 Commandments, it must be reflecting his character. So if you look into the 10 Commandments, let's test you now. What is the first commandment? First commandment? Kids? Don't steal. Yep. We'll put that one down here. But you gave me the first one. Dusak. Don't have any other gods. any other gods. I'll put little ones, little g. I'm God. That's it. Just me. There's nothing else. Number 2. Be kindful. That's close. Be kind to God. Don't make any graven images. Don't make images. And it's God again saying, why make something that looks like me when I'm a living person? I am living and I want to live with you and be in a relationship with you. Why would you make something that looks like me? Have the real deal. As the song says, ain't nothing like the real thing. 3rd one. That's it. Don't take God's name in vain. Don't misuse. I like that word better. Misuse God's name. Names mean everything, especially in my culture. Names are your identity, and the same with God. The names that we give him are the things that identify who he is, what he's like, everything that he encapsulates. Number 4, you all should know this one, Jesse. Yep, remember the Sabbath. Remember my Sabbath. Keep it holy. If your worldview is torment, torture, control, the Sabbath becomes a pain, hurtful, restrictive. If you're looking at a worldview of a God that looks like that, the Sabbath becomes liberating. It becomes an opportunity to identify as someone who trusts in God. Number 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Number 5 is a good one, especially on Father's Day. Honor your parents. Number 6, don't kill. Number 7, don't steal. I should have came up with an abbreviated way to say don't, so I don't have to write it. Don't, it's adultery. Don't adultery. Don't steal someone's wife, someone's partner. You got to get your own. I can't even spell it. Don't steal. Don't lie. Don't covet. And we're finding in this world that there's a massive study on this actual one. It's the command that, especially me as a kid, I'm just like, that doesn't even make sense. But now in a consumer society, they're finding that this is a big one. Don't covet. Just in Brendan Pratt's study, he said, consumerism is not simply the accumulation of stuff, it's the desire to have the stuff. So some of us might this season fill our house with simple, what's that simple way of living? Minimalism. And my mother-in-law and my wife, we're minimalists. And then next month I'll change that stuff and bring different stuff in, but still be minimalists. You see, it's still that desire to have stuff, but it's just fits in a minimalistic attitude. So he says, hey, don't even just focus on always having stuff. Now, when we look at this thing, and I'm going to tell you kids a very quick story very soon about the worldview when it comes to these things. We've always said that these bottom ones pertain to our relationship with each other. Love your parents. Love them. They've done so much for you. Love and respect them. Don't kill people. Love them. Don't steal their relationships. Don't try to hurt it. Don't steal from them. Let them keep their stuff. Don't try to hurt them. Don't lie to them. Don't even think about it. Just worry about connecting and making sure that their relationship's safe. The top ones is the same thing but with God. I'm God. Don't hurt our relationship. Don't try to replace me. Don't try to imitate me. I'm God. But the special thing of the Sabbath that we don't often notice is that it's the actual link between the two relationships. The Sabbath is the opportunity for us to go and do these things of acknowledging God and connecting, brings God into play with humanity. He did it on the seventh day. He walked in the garden. He walked with his creation. He stopped everything and he spent time with them. Such an amazing thing based on the worldview of God as such a loving creator as we see there. The thing that I want to share with you guys and our kids is the story about a father that baked some brownies for his kids. This father had said to his kids, hey, I've got certain rules and regulations, and I don't want you to break any of them because, I need your help in keeping them. These are the rules of our house. So who breaks rules in your house? Anyone break any rules in your house? Got good kids. So the father goes and makes these rules, and the kids don't break them. They're really good kids. But they go to school, and while they're at school, their friends say, hey, we're going to go off and we're going to watch this movie tonight. It is the first edition called Twilight, about some vampires that fly around and hang out with each other and fall in love with each other and all sorts of stuff like that. It sounds amazing. And these boys said, well, we can't go to movies like that because our dad said, as a rule, can't go to this. And they said, no, it's easy. Don't listen to your dad. It's an easy fix. All we say is that you get home, you pretend that you're sick, you go to bed early, you sneak out the window, there's going to be a car, my big brother's going to be there, he'll pick us up, he'll take us to the movies. You come back, sweet as. You have to watch it. Everyone in the school thinks this movie is going to be the greatest thing ever. What do you boys think that they did? Well, I'll tell you what they did. They did exactly what their friends said that they should do. They got home. Dad, I've got a fever. I'm so tired. They quickly ate their dinner. I'm going to go to bed. I really just need to sleep it off. So they went to bed. Dad said, hey, do you need anything? No, you don't need anything. It's all good. We just need to lie down and have a sleep. So they go upstairs. They jump into their bed, close the door. They stuff their blankets just in case their dad goes past and looks through the gap in the door. They jump out the window. The car's there just like they said, and they take off to the movies. And while they're at the movies, they have a stink time because if you've ever watched Twilight, it's a horrible, boring movie of vampires and teenagers. And then they get home, they hop into bed, and then it's the next morning. They start thinking to themselves, did our dad find out? Is there any way that he knows? I think we've actually got away with it. Yes, we got to see this movie. This is great. Dad's not going to get angry. We're perfectly fine. There's no yelling. There's no drama. In fact, they open the door and they smell the fragrance of brownies going through the house. They're like, whoa, Dad's cooking us breakfast. So they come down and they sit down at the table and their dad brings them these brownies. And they get them and they're like, wow. And Dad says, hey, boys, how was your sleep? You feeling better? Yeah, we're feeling so much better. And he said, well, I was so worried about you being sick that I thought I'd make us a very special breakfast and make you guys a treat to make you feel better. You've been working so hard lately. So the boys said, great. He said, here, try these brownies. Eat as many as you like. And the boys start munching them, eating them back. And while they're eating and halfway through their second plate and it's all over their face, their dad turns around and says, boys, I just want to ask you a question. Do you think it's okay to break one of the rules? Now, I've got all these rules here. There's so many. Is it okay to break one? What do you think the boys said? No. That's exactly this. No, Dad. No, it's not even one, just like a tiny one. And the boys said, well, actually, yeah, one's not too bad. Some of them aren't insignificant. One's not too bad. And the dad said, great. I'm glad you said that. Because when you're cooking something to make something delicious to give to somebody, like these brownies, for instance, there's rules. There's a recipe that you follow. And while they followed the recipe, the father said, as I went down the recipe, I found out that I didn't have one of the ingredients. So instead of replacing it, going down and getting some of that ingredient, I decided I'd just replace it because, hey, it's just a little rule. And I went out and went into the cupboard and I got out some dog food and went, wow, I think dog food will just fit perfectly well. It's only one little rule, so I scooped it out and I put it into these brownies. So I hope you boys don't mind that I broke one of the rules. How do you think that the boys felt when they had that little experience? Very, very sick. Oh, Grace, what? They had eaten them, they didn't mind, it tasted so good, but all of a sudden they understood what it meant to break one, and it ruined the whole experience. And in the Bible, in the book of James, chapter 2, if you turn with me to the book of James, chapter 2, and verse 10, very quickly. And in the book of James, chapter 2, verse 10, it says, "For whoever keeps the whole law and yet stumbles at just one point is guilty of breaking it all." We often look at this and go, man, Jesus, this is a bit harsh. Oh God, that's a bit of a harsh statement, breaking one of the laws. But if our worldview changes to the real picture of what God is like, we understand that He gives us His laws not to hurt us, but rather to protect us, to make our lives better. I have come to give you life and life to the full. Some of the things that we didn't add up here, and one of the things I want us to focus on is in the verse that was just up there. I've got the clicker. In 1 John chapter 4, verse 8, right now we're going through a time in prophecy where people are thinking about the end times. They're thinking about what sort of steps we should take. But if we haven't got the right worldview of God, then no matter what actions we do, it's not going to get us anywhere. And a lot of people have said to me, "Pastor, I'm tired of hearing about love. I want to hear the good stuff." And I know, I've heard it before. I'm going, yeah, this is really good stuff. I know what to dodge. I know what to stay away from. But if I miss the worldview that God is love, then it's going to lead to nothing. Because I want to introduce you to this. It says, whoever does not love God, does not know God. Oh, we didn't include the entire verse. But whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. Now, the difference between the statement that God is love, that's different to any other statement in the Bible, is that this is the only place in the Bible where God uses a noun to describe Himself. Love is presented as a noun. It's not describing Him. It's not an adjective like all the others. He actually uses a noun in the statement, and He says, I am love. I encapsulate everything. So the difference in the language is that this. He's not saying, I am loving. God doesn't say, I am loving. He says, I am love. God doesn't say He is patience. He says He's patient. See the difference? He doesn't say that he says that He's just, but He doesn't claim to be justice. He says that He's forgiving, but He doesn't claim to be forgiveness. So these words that we have here, they describe what God is like, but when it comes to this word here, He says, this is what I am. This is what I am. Can you see the difference in it? It's the only time and the only word in the entire Bible where He says, I am love. God is love. So the importance of this theory is found, well, not theory, the importance of this statement is setting your worldview on what God's like and what the picture of God is like. You'll find that in Adventism, that our lowest thing in the NCD or the natural church development is that we lack in loving relationships. Not just our church, Adventism as a whole. We lack in loving relationships. And yet God turns around and He says, this is what I am. And so if you want to know why I keep harping on about we need to stay connected to the vine so we produce all the fruits, we need to come down to a worldview of knowing what God is really like, we need to know the gospel, well, it all starts with that statement, God is love. And we're trying our best so far, but it looks like we're failing at loving because maybe we don't know God as well as we thought we did. That's pretty hard to take. But if you're thinking that there are things to come, and that Jesus is coming again, and all these things are happening out in the world, if you don't know God, then what's the use of knowing that he's coming again? God is love. Our last story that you know very well and very quickly, found in Genesis chapter 22. We've heard this story before, but I have to share it because it's my story of my dad and his expression of love to me, well, to my brother, and us being able to see it. Genesis chapter 22. It's the story of Isaac and Abraham and Isaac. And it is a story that doesn't make sense at times, but yet is the ultimate expression of God's love. Now it came about, from verse 1, now it came about after these things that God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, and he said, here I am. He said, take now your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there on the mountains, there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I will tell you. So Abraham rose early in the morning and saddled his donkey and took 2 of his young men with him and Isaac his son. And he split the wood for the burnt offering and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. On the 3rd day, Abraham raised his eyes and saw the place from a distance. Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey, and I and the lad will go over there, and we will worship and return to you. Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son. And he took in his hand the fire and the knife. So the 2 of them walked on together. Isaac spoke to Abraham his father and said, my father. And he said, here I am, my son. And he said, behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Abraham said, God will provide for himself the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. So the 2 of them walked on together. Then they came to the place of which God had told them, and Abraham built the altar there and arranged the wood and bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. I could have done the prodigal son or something like that where the father does something nice, but instead in this one, God turns around as if it's some sort of joke. The opening words is what? A test? Well, hadn't he already been tested enough? You know, he was already old, waiting for the son, the seed, to be fulfilled. And when he finally gets the seed, actually before he even gets the son, God pops up and says, I'm going to give you a son in your old age. He's like, oh yeah, great, I can't do this because I'm old, but I trust you. And then God makes him wait for 14 years after that. Isn't that enough of a test? But no, he goes and gets his son, his only son, who he loves so much, and God says, I test you. Here you go, son. You have to go and kill your son, God. Abraham, go and take your son and show me how much you love me and sacrifice your son back to me. This is a horrible, horrible story, but if your worldview says that God is loving, then there has to be something more to the story. You see, when they get there, he has this faith that God's going to provide something. I don't know what it is. And for us, when we're walking with God, we don't know what it is. We don't know what God has in store for us. We don't know what the end is, but we want to be faithful. But when we read a story like that, we think that we need to be robotic about it. I've read it pretty robotic. But when you hear it, it's such a story of pain and hurt. It's a father that I suppose there's no words to explain what he was going through. Instead, all you read in this passage is that it says son, only son. As we close off here, it says in verse 10, Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. The pain and the agony that must have taken for any father to have bound their child there, to try and be honest to God, but also to be there for their child. It would have been so painful. I can't imagine what sort of thoughts were going through his head, what sort of faith he needed. But it says here, but the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham. And Abraham said, here I am. That's the second time he said, here I am, and answered the call of God. He said, do not stretch out your hand against the lad, and do nothing to him. For now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. If you read that passage again for yourself and take the time to read it in prayer, read how many times the word son is repeated. You see, in the Hebrew language, they didn't have beautiful language that the Greeks gave to us. It was very concrete. But what they did have was repetition. If they say something once, it's pretty important, because they wouldn't say it at all. They didn't like writing stuff. So they say it once, it's important. If they say it's twice, it's really important. If they say it's 3 times, focus, pay attention to it. I believe that he says it about 9 to 11 times in this passage. My son, my only son. As we come to a close, I want to read this last verse. It says in verse 13, then Abraham raised his eyes and looked up, and behold, behind him a ram caught in the thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering in place of his son. You're always hearing about a lamb, right? The Lamb of God, the sacrifice of a lamb. And then it's odd, out of all stories, when there's a father-son story, all of a sudden it's changed to a ram. Did they get it wrong? Was there a spelling mistake? Were there no lambs available? Did God have no lambs wandering around up there by themselves? But instead, this is actually the view that it takes to come from a father's point of view to make a sacrifice. And the ram is a father. And the Father, our God, is our Father who has also made a sacrifice. You see, Jesus was willing to give up his life, but the Father was willing to give his Son. John 3:16, for God so loved, the God that we drew a picture of up there, good, gentle, loving, because he so loved the world that he made a sacrifice. And Abraham was able to show us the pain that it takes, that God was going through to do this. The good, gentle, loving, patient God, he gave up his son, that so whoever believes, you and me, if we believe in him, we will not perish, but have everlasting life. Whatever your picture is of God, the best example of it is when we look to the cross. You may look at God and say, you mess up my style, you mess up my way of doing things, you mess up my music choices, you mess up my dress choices, you mess up my timetable, whatever it is. But if you really want to know what God is like, look to the cross. Because he is a father that was willing to give up everything, even the pain of losing his son, his only son, that you and I may have the opportunity to be back in his presence. If you don't have a father to celebrate with, may you spend time with our Father God, who says that he will always be there, and he has shown us that he is willing to give up heaven and earth for you and I to be in his presence. May God bless you.
Let's stand and sing about our Father God. I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails.